story of Jeffrey Manor, you must tell where it all began. That's the story of steel. The massive steelworks that were built over the natural swampland at the southeast end of Chicago, extending into Indiana. The mills were operated by Eastern European immigrants. These men had the work ethic and skills to bring the raw iron ore coming in from ships and trains and scrap metal from surrounding junkyards for processing. They fed the materials into the open hearth furnaces to create a boiling molten mass that formed the glowing ingots many stories high. Then they skillfully used technology to process the steel into piping, beams, rails, and other configurations needed to construct the skyscrapers, bridges, railroads, automobiles, trucks, tractors, and all the structures and equipment needed to grow this great country. These were the same men who made the steel that went into the tanks, airplanes, ships, and guns that enabled us to overcome the threat of aggression against the freedom of our democratic way of life in World War II.
These Eastern Europeans built their communities, their homes, their schools, and their churches all around the mills. They lived and thrived in their secure alcoves, maintaining their culture, lifestyle, beliefs, and identities.
They built a great commercial area along Commercial Avenue that they called South Chicago, with retail stores, restaurants, and all venues needed to support their communities.
There was also the Jewish presence in this thriving commercial district. The Goldblatt brothers developed one of their many department stores as a retail anchor of Commercial Avenue, located at the southwest corner of 91st and Commercial. There was also Lester's Clothiers, Gassman's high-end menswear, Howard's Army-Navy store, surplus store, a full-service hardware store, and others. The Jewish presence was also exhibited in their congregation Bicker-Coleum at 8927 Houston Avenue, which is still standing. The temple was attended by Jewish business owners and merchants beginning in 1907.
The Greek population were players in the area too, not only with their Gaiety ice cream and candy store and Gaiety movie theater, but as critical financiers. They ran the South Chicago Bank, financed the steel mills, and developed real estate projects. One such project was called South Deering. They filled in swampland with a gritty waste material from steel production called slag. Single-family homes were built as rental units for the migrant steel workers who filled the labor ranks in the mills needed for the war effort. South Deering ran from 95th Street on the north end to 103rd Street on the south, Torrance Avenue on the east, and Van Vlissingen on the west, bordering on swampland, an open, flat, uninhabited area. There was a minimum of amenities, little commercial area, no paved streets, no public transportation, and inadequate public facilities, public school facilities.
On the south and west side of the city, there was also big development in the early part of the century. In areas like Lawndale and Inglewood, immigrant Jews from Eastern Europe built large communities around elegant synagogues. In Inglewood, they built a thriving, vibrant commercial area on 63rd Street with shops, restaurants, and extravagant theaters featuring first-run movies, stage shows, and newsreels. Theaters like the Southtown were like European palaces. You entered a wonderland in a lobby with live swans swimming in a pool, resplendent with ornate tiling on the floors and walls. There was a playroom with a nurse to watch children during the performances. Patrons sat under a sky of electric stars in the luxurious and lavish surroundings and a massive screen. Those theaters were developed and run by a Jewish-owned company, Balaban and Katz.
As a kid, it was like living in a wonderland. The apartment buildings were havens where you knew your neighbors so well that you practically lived in each other's homes. Our grandmothers hung laundry out to dry on lines that stretched from the back porches across the backyards and would engage in vibrant conversations in their native languages with neighbors on the floors above and below. The public parks surrounding our buildings were spacious and filled with field houses with swimming pools and all kinds of facilities. The commercial areas were filled with stores for all necessities and luxuries.
Sears Roebuck and Company was headquartered in Lawndale. The complex had a retail store, a catalog facility, and a corporate executive offices, which was second in size only to the United States Pentagon. Sears built stores featuring their signature tower across the country, along with catalog outlets, warehouses, and merchandise staging facilities in virtually every town and city of America, employing hundreds of thousands. All of the thousands of items in the Sears catalog were stamped "Made in America" in factories also employing hundreds of thousands of American workers.
When that big new color catalog came out, we couldn't wait to place orders as our budgets allowed. The spring and fall supplements provided the seasonal changes in our wardrobes, with our outgrown clothes and shoes becoming hand-me-downs for our younger siblings.
The president and chairman of the board of directors of the largest mail order business in America, Sears Roebuck and Company, during the first third of the 20th century was Julius Rosenwald. He was a great American philanthropist. He lived in the Kenwood neighborhood on the south side of Chicago and was the only Jew to be allowed membership in the prestigious and prejudicial South Shore Country Club.
The Jewish population on the west side, as well as the non-Jewish Eastern Europeans on the southeast side, lived in their secure, isolated enclaves. They maintained their separate cultural and religious practices and ethnic identities.
Suddenly, in the midst of all this separate, comfortable existence, World War II was thrust upon us. The immigrants and first generation of both communities were swept off to live, fight, and die together for one common cause: to preserve their homeland and democracy. Their separateness was replaced by a new identity. They were the new Americans, maintaining their cultural and religious traditions, but embracing the new post-war dream of freedom of movement and home ownership.
As kids, we watched the war in newsreels and heard about it on the radio. We waited anxiously for our dads to come home, believing life would pick up in the old neighborhood just where it left off.
The new American dream centered around a single-family home with the proverbial white picket fence and private yard. The concept was an emerging community of coexistence between Jews and non-Jews, sharing American ideals.
To fulfill the dream, a project was initiated to transform the South Deering rental home neighborhood. These small homes, which had been largely vacated with the decline of the labor force needed for the war effort, were transformed into privately owned homes with mortgages. The project was named Jeffrey Manor.
Here was another wonderland with our own front and backyards. We could plant flowers, and on Arbor Day, we would plant a tiny sapling that would grow into a tall, beautiful tree just as we grew.
The manor suited the financial resources of returning veterans who didn't have the means to purchase in places like South Shore, Hyde Park, or the like.
These modestly priced duplex homes were swept up ravenously by these buyers of diverse backgrounds. There emerged a new phenomenon of a true community spirit to work collectively to overcome the obstacles and deficiencies at hand. The collective effort transformed the previous gravel streets to paved roads with real concrete sidewalks. The city bus lines that ended at the north end were extended into the south end. On the north and south ends, which had been virtually vacant, thriving commercial venues were attracted, with drugstores featuring full fountain service, a 5 and dime, grocery stores, laundromats, cleaners, a Chinese restaurant, a bowling alley, and even a music school that taught the affordable instrument of the day, the accordion, with an all-accordion band. I played in the accordion band with our favorite Woods polka.
It seemed like every day some new shop or service magically sprung up. When the Tasty Freeze opened on 100th Street, the line stretched around the block for a taste of the new ice cream that swirled out of those chrome-plated machines into cones, shakes, and sundaes.
In the course of the new America, lifestyles changed. The ethnic foods, so elaborately and laboriously prepared, were replaced by the new vision of quick and easy preparation. Specialties like Kraft macaroni and cheese, frozen pot pies, and the many varieties of Campbell soup ready to heat and serve. The new social intrusion into the old family lifestyle was television. Full course meals around the traditional family table replaced by TV dinners eaten on TV tables.
We dined and grossed in the typical real American families, like the Nelsons, who lived the perfect American life in the perfect American home, devoid of any traces of ethnicity in their speech or mannerisms.
We grew up with David and Ricky Nelson. Oh, that cute little Ricky Nelson. The Manor was a haven of joyous lifestyle. Former residents relished memories of young girls jumping rope or playing hopscotch on a course defined by chalk marks on the sidewalk. The boys played with spinning tops and marbles, if anyone even knows what those are anymore. The children of the new residents grew up with the neighborhood. The porches of those duplex homes were like community bandstands of shared conversations as we listened to the reincarnations of war experiences. We enjoyed that great communal dialogue on summer nights, even though we were plagued by massive infestations of mosquitoes from the swamp directly behind us. But then the swamp was filled in with more slag from the mills, and a whole new expansion of upscale duplex homes called Marionette Manor emerged. The girls sang special songs for keeping the cadence when jumping rope. One girl on each end swinging the rope while we sang Ishkabibble Alazaya Bungalario, Ishkabibble Alazaya Bungalario.
Luella Grammar School was so inadequate that we had to attend in shifts. Some students attended in the morning and others in the afternoon. You had to leave your textbooks behind for the following shift. These new structures called portables were built. They looked like army barracks, unheated in the winter and sweltering in the summer, but it was expansion.
We grew from playing baseball in vacant lots with cardboard bases and transitioned to organized Babe Ruth leagues with real uniforms and umpires on a real field. We followed the White Sox, celebrated their 1959 Go-Go World Series team. Of course, we grew up hating the New York Yankees.
We grew from separate activities of boys and girls to interest in the opposite sex with dates like taking the Jeffrey bus to the Jeffrey movie theater and burgers and shakes at Peter Pan restaurant across 71st Street. where some lifelong relationships began.
Can you believe Stephen asked me for a date? How did he know how much I liked him? Yes, he had it all planned. That new movie at the Jeffrey Theater with Charles Bronson, and burgers and shakes at the Pan. Wait, he probably will put his arm around me in the dark. Wait, what if it does become more than that, like going steady? Wait, what if he asks me to become engaged when we graduate from Bowen? Yes, Cheryl, I am thinking of what could happen after that. I can't even think anymore right now. I'll call you afterwards. Wait, do you think I should offer to pay half? We reached high school age with two choices. The local Bowen High School was focused on academics. The phrase was coined, college material, by proud Manor parents whose sons and daughters were destined to go on to university-level study.
The other choice was Chicago Vocational High School for those who sought a career in the trades for the boys, and positions like secretarial service and fashion design for the girls.
There was another important aspect of CVS. It was an all-city school. That meant exposure to students outside the cloistered, white Jeffrey Manor community. It meant for the first time interracial interaction with African Americans whose families came up from the South.
There were unique differences between the two factions besides race. Their dress was different. Whites had a dress style of peg pants, which severely narrowed at the ankle over snapjack shoes, with a mechanical tongue worn with the high-collar paisley shirts. The other white, more severe alternative was a motorcycle jacket over a white t-shirt, tight-fitting jeans, and an engineer boots, chains and shoulder straps optional. A typical white haircut was called the DA, standing for duck's ass. You can use your imagination for that. We waited anxiously for the next Elvis song to come out.
Doop doo doo doo
Sing.
doo 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 doo. You know I can't be found sitting home all alone. If you can't come around, at least please telephone. Don't be cruel to a heart that's true.
The black students had their special dress code. Many came to school in full three-piece Ivy League suits. These had very natural, unpadded shoulders, trousers that hovered high over shoe tops with a buckle in the back, and narrow-collared shirts with Slim Jim ties.
The black students were incredibly musically talented, singing perfect harmony in groups on the school steps to the current doo-wop, multi-harmony tunes like Come Go With Me by the Dell Vikings. Dum 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 a dooby dum 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 a dooby dum 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 wah 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 wah.
Well, I love you, darling. Come and go with me, come home with me. Way beyond the sea, I need you, darling. Come and go with me. Wah, 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 wah. Come, 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 come into my heart. Tell me, darling, we will never part. I need you, darling. Come and go with me. Wah, 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 wah. Oh, yes, I need you. Yes, I really need you. Please say you'll never leave me. But I'm gonna say you'll never. Please say you never give me a chance. Dum, dum, dum.
It wasn't just a fashion differential. It was great economic disparity. The white sons of the mill workers filled the school parking lot with their popular 1956 and 1957 Chevrolets. That economic security would often emerge in instances between a white student and a teacher. In an attempt to enforce discipline with the threat of detention or expulsion, the teacher might receive the following response: F you, go ahead. I got a job waiting for me in the mills.
Needless to say, these situations were only a precursor to a more severe and divisive social trauma.
America emerged from World War II triumphant and victorious as the most powerful country in the world. We had been challenged in Europe and triumphed. We had been challenged in Asia and we were victorious. We had triumphed on the high seas, in the skies, in forest plains, in deserts, and defeated all opposition. We liberated France and quashed the Nazi blitz against England.
Now our veterans return to relish the new peace and security they brought to the world. We would claim the new freedom and prosperity we had won. These veterans from the southeast side of Chicago return to claim their rightful place for their conquest and sacrifice.
This was a new revitalized America. Our veterans were no longer immigrants or children of immigrants. They were the new citizens who had entitlement and rights to all the country had to offer, of all the new American dream.
A big part of that dream was a single family home with a private yard surrounded by the proverbial white picket fence. This meant moving out of the white ethnic neighborhoods of their parents and forming new communities. The residents of one such newly created community, Jeffrey Manor, was poised to transform the old solitary steelworker rental homes into their ideal of America.
This transformation was more than residential or economic. It was a social change in which women emerged to surpass their mother's role as traditional housewife. They were the new Pepsi generation of style and expression, but a lot more than that. They took their equal place with their husbands in the formidable task of creating this new community. They proceeded with a new inexhaustible energy to organize and negotiate. In one dramatic event, Manor gals blocked the city gravel and tar trucks with baby buggies to demand real paved streets and triumph. They went on with demonstrations to get the public school board to expand the limited facilities for the proper education of their children. They were the force and enticed the merchants to provide products needed for their households and services to come in. They fought for the bus lines to be extended to transport kids to high schools after they graduated from grammar school. They petitioned until the mosquito-infested swamp was filled in and new manor homes were constructed.
Roll those empty baby buggies right up in front of the tar and gravel trucks and steamrollers. They won't dare touch them. Then we'll make our signs for the boycott at the school board meeting to get new classrooms built. Our kids aren't going on half-day shifts and have to leave their books behind. After that, we'll start on the city bus lines and make them extend across the railroad tracks on 95th Street. After that, we'll hit City Hall for a new development in the swampland. Come on, gals, let's get going.
The Catholics built their great Our Lady Gate of Heaven church with and attracted Porticelli School and Rectory, and attached the Porticelli School and Rectory. The Protestants built their congregation. The Jewish population recruited a newly ordained rabbi from Indiana by giving him a manor duplex home rent-free while he held services in the small living room and helped raise funds for building a synagogue. Congregation Kehilath Israel was formed in the new building, and Rabbi Einhorn devoted his life to serving his congregation as well as being a vital force in ecumenical activities for the whole community.
This was a remarkable community where we all kept our separate religious identities while living harmoniously with the feeling of complete safety and security.
The African American population, many of whom were returning veterans, also had a new vision for their country. They wanted to cast off the yoke of poverty and oppression in the South that they brought with them from the South states. Social activists encouraged the mass migration of African Americans up north to Chicago to find a new prosperity in the high-paying jobs in the steel mills and factories. They were entitled as real citizens. They flooded into neighborhoods like Lawndale and Englewood. It was a true rebuilding and revitalization.
The post-war steel industry was still booming. It had retooled from defense industries that made the tanks, planes, ships, and all the vast machinery for the successful war effort. The mills now supplied industries like the automotive plants to produce the new American dream car to fit this concept of luxury and affluence.
These new automobile creations were like rolling sculptures. They defied all restrictions of efficiency and practicality. They were American steel-produced vehicles with massive fins and vibrant color combinations that resembled flying boats, eager to leave the confines of gravity. The interiors were the height of luxury at the time. They were a manifestation of the mood of the country. These were the American-made steel chariots that would transport us into a glorious, boundless future.
That new Studebaker is ahead of its time, that design like a rocket with graceful fins, those color combinations, those reclining seats, that overdrive feature, whatever the hell that is.
All was gloriously hopeful and promising for an everlasting glowing future. What was not revealed to these newly minted public citizens was the manipulations that were occurring far beyond their ability to know and comprehend. These events would change their world irrevocably.
The steel mills had prospered greatly with the war demand. They used the great profits to pay the dividends to stockholders and high salaries to their executives, many of whom owned vast shares. However, they chose not to reinvest those vast profits for upgrading the steel mill production facilities. A new steel making process called the forced oxygen method was developed that was far superior and efficient from the old open hearth technology employed by our American mills. The controlling powers of the mills had left their companies behind the times.
As a consequence of the post-war treaties in Europe and Asia, one of the agreements between the free world nations was to pay reparations for the devastation of the Axis countries. The concept was to stabilize them to avoid another large world crisis. Some great powers in our government and industrial giants moved to use the reparation funds to rebuild the steel mills in Japan, as well as other industries in Europe. Of course, these new mills were built with the superior forced oxygen technology. What these great powers realized was that with American government investment, Japan could be highly competitive to U.S. steel due to their cheap labor costs and in spite of transportation costs across the oceans. It was virtually a plan to destroy the U.S. steel industry that had supported the vast populations of southeast side Chicago to create enormous profiteering for a few. Can you believe what we're reading in the papers? Made in Japan was like a running joke for things like toy plastic soldiers. Now they have steel mills that are better than ours.
The eventual shuttering of the steel mills wreaked devastation on the population of workers. They lost good salaries and pensions that they had worked a lifetime for. Those dedicated workers could not comprehend how such a tragedy could occur in their great free country that they had fought and died for. There was little means of transitions for workers who had no skills or trainings for jobs that were in demand outside the mills. They knew no other life.
The other white families in the manor were also on the verge of transition. They were growing up and growing out. Those manor homes, which had once seemed so adequate, so comfortable, began to burst at the seams. The small 2-bedroom home, which was all right for one child or even two of the same sex. However, once there was a boy and a girl, or more, it was an issue. Attempts were made to expand by building an addition into the small backyard or converting the basement into another bedroom. The manor homes had reached their capacity.
We really don't want to leave, but what's the choice? Do you want to stay, or do you want to have that new baby you've dreamed of? You know, it's not really a choice.
The Greek bankers who had been the financiers of the steel mills saw the looming clouds on the horizon. They also saw the sun of opportunity shining through.
With their shrewd business ability and vision of the future, they had for some time been acquiring underused farmland in the northern suburbs like Skokie. They had for some time envisioned and planned new communities of higher level upscale homes built around shopping malls and excellent public facilities. Moreover, original mortgages on manor homes were being paid off.
It was a natural opportunity to cash in on the equity growth and convert into new mortgages in the upscale suburban properties.
Just look at these houses, split levels and ranch styles with those expansive lawns, the shopping centers, the real parks and public facilities, not to mention the new synagogue. It makes our old one look like a hovel. It's real permanent seats instead of folding chairs. And the stage has got a commercial-grade sound system.
There was another cash flow opportunity for the bankers. The restrictions on mortgages for home ownership previously imposed on black families were being lifted. New government-backed loans were available for buying the now available manor homes. It was a win-win situation for the bankers and developers.
A new, more modern and spacious synagogue was built in the northern suburbs along with Christian churches. It was an easy transition for the Jews. The new American lifestyle also included a change from their restrictive traditional practice to the newer reformed version of Judaism, which allowed freedom like driving on the Sabbath. This mobility fit the more spread out suburban community.
Look, honey, you've got to take it all in stride. We can't hang on to the past. The way things are spread out here, it's not even practical to keep the old traditional regulations of not driving on the Sabbath. That's why we've got this spacious parking lot. Also, you can just drop off the kids for Hebrew school and special activities in the recreation area. We're going to need that convenience with our new professional schedules. We're not just going to be homemakers anymore. These new commercial centers will provide opportunity for plenty of us gals to go into business. And there's another thing. They're going to have to sell these new homes to a whole range of new buyers. It's going to be the wives who make the big purchase decisions now. Who better to be the real estate agent than another gal like us? It's a new day, baby. It's a new way. You know, another thing, we're not just going to sit on our behinds during the services at the synagogue. We're going to be right up there on that stage, chanting along with the great stereo sound system. The result was a massive exodus of the white population from Jeffrey Manor, with the influx of African Americans taking their place as homeowners and building a new community.
The whole historical era of Jeffrey Manor had not been without issues. The manor homes still stand in testimony of that dynamic social development, but the stores and businesses that once vitalized the community have been diminished, most likely by the severe decrease in economic resources with the closing of the steel mills and factories.
The swampland has reclaimed its place where the gigantic steel mill buildings once stood. The roar of the mighty blast furnaces with molten metal had echoed off into oblivion. The enormous Sears enterprise in Lawndale had relocated to the magnificent Sears Tower is no longer. Renowned Sears catalog containing thousands of items, all stamped with Made in America, is a memory. Thousands of Sears outlets in every corner of the country, creating the hundreds of thousands of American jobs and retail manufacturers, have vanished. Our automobile manufacturing industry has lost a great portion of the market to emerging countries. Notwithstanding, the vital signs of revitalizing promise right here in Jeffrey Manor. The once mostly open field we called our park has a real beautiful field house and facilities. Likewise, this elegant library is a vision of possibilities to come.
Possibly, hopefully, the once Jewish synagogue, now boarded up, can be repurposed for that hopeful vision. The Jewish Star of David still projects through the layers of paint, along with the Christian symbols that have been embossed on the outside walls. Hopefully, all this is a signature for an ecumenical rebuilding and revitalizing future.
That hope and promise we felt when we pledged our allegiance to this great country in the early days of Luella Grammar School, standing before the American flag with our hands over our hearts.
I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming.